and the loss of love is a heartbreaker. The wave of life took away Olivia's beloved, oblivious to her inability to exist without the gray-haired man with the cheerful smile she loved more than anyone else in the world. Nothing changed in the Atlantic over the period which seemed a lifetime to Olivia. The waves rose and raced toward the beach to scare baby gulls, and receded the same way they did before. One day, Olivia drew the great ocean, its endless waters, the frightening waves carrying away her beloved gray-haired man with a cheerful smile which signified his indifference to separation with Olivia. The wave of life brought him another woman, who he'll warm up with his love, erasing Olivia from his memory forever. Having finished the drawing, Olivia laid on her bed and wept through that quiet moonlit night. The moon stared at Olivia through the window, powerless to help her. Olivia kept drawing day in and day out, committing her feelings, her pain to the paper. Only after we lose our loved ones for good, we begin to understand how happy we were when they were around, but we were unable to appreciate them. Only after we lose our loved ones for good, we begin to understand how happy we were when they were around, but we were unable to appreciate them. Time went by, and Olivia was getting as gray as her beloved. She bought another large 2-story beach house, not too far from the cafe where she was selling pastries. But she was lonely and unhappy in her new mansion. Early morning or late evening, when the beach was nearly deserted, Olivia sat on the beach, drawing. One morning, when gloomy skies completely obscured the sun, Olivia headed for the beach, carrying her customary bag with drawing paper and bread for the seagulls. The ocean hadn't awoken, reluctant to stir the waves at a time when the sun itself was slumbering. Light ocean breeze stroked Olivia's face and rushed ahead to let the seagulls know their breakfast was coming. Yet the seagulls were asleep as well, so Olivia seemed to be the only one awake that morning. A cool breeze was blowing. The multicolored lights in the backyards of the posh mansions, the habitats of joy, were turning off. The fragrance of freshly baked bread from the nearby cafe filled Olivia's heart with chagrin. She sat on the sand, not too far from the surf line, and began to draw. A little later, she put the unfinished drawing in the bag, laid on the sand, and closed her eyes. Scenes from the past, hidden deep in nooks and crannies of Olivia's memory, were brought to life, awakened by the smell of bread. The image of the gray-haired man with a cheerful smile, the greatest love of her life, surfaced from the memory. Olivia could see him clearly. He was smiling as if nothing of consequence had happened. Most likely, he didn't understand how much Olivia loved him, or perhaps he simply didn't care. Tears ran down Olivia's face. She tried to open her eyes, but failed. Baby gulls appeared out of nowhere, climbing all over Olivia, pecking her neck and her face, scared at the prospect of losing their devoted friend and benefactor. Suddenly, mighty ocean swells appeared in the distance, racing quickly toward the shore. They grabbed Olivia's unconscious body and carried it into the abyss to warm it up with love equal to that expressed in Olivia's drawings. Observing the ocean claiming their patron, baby gulls scrambled into the surf in panic, in vain, in hope of reclaiming the body. But the ocean repelled their futile effort, chasing them away with foam spray. The ocean and baby gulls were the sole entities who never forgot Olivia's affection for them. The baby gulls attempted to wake Olivia up, running over her breathless body, while the Atlantic claimed the body to wash away from her heart the pain left behind by the one who Olivia loved more than the ocean. as if the Atlantic struggled to prove that it was the ocean that she ought to have loved. It won't betray or let one down, and in the end will carry one into the abyss to wash away the heartache. The gray-haired man never gave up his cane, never remarried, for he failed to meet someone who'd love him like Olivia did. They lived within a 3-hour drive from each other, at the shore of the Atlantic Ocean, loving and missing each other. Idiot. Good evening to you, my dear. On second thought, when you start reading this letter, it will probably be morning, not evening. No big deal. You know that I am thinking of you day and night anyway. I miss you so much. I keep calling you all day long. You have such a dumb phone. I'm totally baffled. It keeps saying, you have reached 213. What a dorky, heartless machine. Do you even know who you are talking to? Wake me up in the middle of the night and I'll give you that number without batting an eyelid. How could I ever forget it? Those digits are totally embedded in my memory. Even when I see those numbers in completely unrelated situations, I treat them like my closest relatives. Like the other day at a grocery store. The cashier rang the register, and those numbers just popped up on the screen. I kept staring at them, and they, the nerve, were staring back at me, sneering. What? Look familiar, don't we? You have no idea how many female fingers dial us in one day. And you are not allowed to. He does not care about you, so why would we be nice to you? I got so mad, as you can imagine, so I grabbed some useless items from the rack to add to my purchase just to get rid of those obnoxious numbers. My darling, I keep thinking about how we first met. On that day I was walking by a photo shop and had a sudden urge to check out the happy faces of the people whose portraits were hanging on the walls. An ancient gray-haired shopkeeper was busy behind the counter sorting out the prints and stuffing them into white envelopes. When I saw the pictures of you, I felt like someone pinched the inside of my chest, right at the spot where my heart was pounding. Ouch! Who just pinched me? I cried. The old man finally took notice of me, staring at me through his thick glasses in perplexity. I certainly didn't. It's been a while since I've taken any interest in things of this sort. However, there's no one else here but you and me, he muttered, eyeing me with curiosity. Weird, but I could have sworn someone pinched me from the inside, I said. When did it happen? The old man inquired. Just when you laid out these pictures, I said, as I pointed to your pictures on the table. This guy's photographs? He asked. No wonder. If I were your age and sex, I probably would have a similar sensation. What's my sex got to do with it? I wondered. He gave me such a bizarre look, like I was deranged or something, that I felt embarrassed. But I was dying to take another peek at your pictures. What's your business here, young lady? The old man asked sternly. You have so many nice pictures on the walls, I just wanted to check them out. I am an artist, I explained proudly. And that's all? He asked. And him, I said lasciviously, pointing at your photographs. What a hunk. Oh, the one who pinched your heart, he giggled. Yeah. Could you give me one of those pictures? I pleaded. Give you a picture? He asked in astonishment. Of course not. But you may be lucky. He is coming down to pick up his photographs right now, and maybe he'll give you one. At that time, the door opened, and you stepped in. I felt another pinch in my chest. Ouch! You were so gorgeous. I smiled at you, and you gave me a puzzled look. This young lady has been badgering me to give her one of your photographs, the old man announced cheerfully. My photograph? You wondered. But why? You looked even more cute in your bewilderment, and I thought that you were perhaps the most handsome guy on the entire planet. Because you are outrageously gorgeous, I would just hang it on the wall and stare at it, I admitted bravely. Well then, how about the original? You laughed heartily. Would you like to join me for a little birthday party? It's my birthday today, you know." "What is today's date?" I asked. "September the 15th, you smiled. "From now on, it will be my favorite day of the year," I announced triumphantly, "because you were born on that day." You looked at me, then at the old man, but then back at me. "You ready?" you asked softly. "Let's go then." You paid the shopkeeper, took your pictures, and we left together. Oh, you were so damn dazzling, looking so elegant in your exquisite, expensive clothes. Right away, I had a hunch that I would have an eternal crush on you. At the restaurant, I had a glass of wine, and I almost flipped out. There was another man next to you, your spitting image. "What's your brother's name?" I giggled, trying to focus. "You guys look so alike, you do. Are you twins, for real?" I remembered you were laughing your heart out. In fact, you were hysterical, and people began to pay attention to our table. Then we went to your place. I knew you were in love with me too, otherwise why would you have invited me to your place, right? I loved your house instantly. Of course you live in that house. I even adored your clothes just because you wear them. I still remember how exquisitely you were kissing me. No one had ever kissed me like that before. What happiness it was to realize that you were so madly in love with me. Only, why did you laugh so much when you were kissing me? I still can't figure this one out. "What is your phone number?" I asked you the morning before I left. "How can I get in touch with you if I don't have your number? I will miss you so much. I think we should be together forever." You laughed again and wrote your number on a piece of paper. Oh, it's nice that you were so kind. I wrote down my number for you because I was so madly in love with you. I just totally couldn't get why you forgot to give me your photograph. I had asked you so many times, and yet you still forgot. When I was leaving, it was raining buckets. Perhaps you noticed too. I hardly stepped out on the porch when the wind grabbed me in its tight embrace, raised my pretty pink skirt skywards, hugged me, permeating my entire slender, only slightly chubby body. The naughty wind was positively hitting on me. I thank you, mighty wind. I bow before thee, before your power, your kindness. But I am not lonely anymore. I have found him, and I am madly in love with him, no less than he loved me this night, I cried out happily. The wind released me from its grip, having stroked my face gently in parting. And although I was totally blissful, I cried. As I walked home, I saw the trees swinging back and forth in the wind, while yellow leaves, dangling on their long, withered necks, were making a desperate effort to cling to the black, wet branches. They were jealously ogling the neighboring hemlocks and constantly complained, "You evergreens are so lucky, you don't have to go. And look at us, we are done for." "There's no happiness in eternity," boomed the hemlocks with a patronizing but majestic sway. "Nobody is immortal anyway. We just live longer, that's all." "Farewell, farewell, friends!" The yellow leaves were screaming frantically as the storm picked them up, carrying them away from their trees, weeping over their demise with a rainfall of tears. The wind howled and moaned, stripping the trees tirelessly of their soaked clothes. I cried bitterly watching this tragedy. I grabbed my pad and pencil and began to draw like crazy. You remember that I am an artist, don't you? Perhaps someday I will become as famous as Cézanne or Dali. Hold on, what am I talking about? Anything but Dali. I loathe crazy people. Anyway, to get to the point, after that night when you loved me so much, I painted those yellow leaves so unwilling to die, those that the wind had no mercy on, but ripped them off the trees and carried them away. Someone bought the painting, and now it is displayed in a museum, in the Orange Hall. I go there often to look at my painting, and the more I look at it, the more I wonder. Like, what if you had loved me a whole bunch of nights? Could I have painted the same number of paintings? And would all of them be hanging in a museum now? Don't you love me? I'm sure you do, and very, very much, because you were such a good man. When I saw your photograph, I knew right away that you were a good-hearted man. I could have told you how much I loved you, only you knew it already. I have been burning with a wild desire to love, and I am basking in my feelings now. You know, last night in my lonely, slightly cold bed, I began thinking and arrived at a conclusion. There is no such thing as a strong-willed woman. Each and every one of us is weak, in dire need of love, of a man's touch. Even the toughest one, if she has no man in her life, would feel down, and perhaps even cry when left alone with no one to see her tears. Don't believe it if someone tells you she is a strong-willed woman. But me, I am happy because I found you. I am dying to paint your portrait. You are such a kind person. I loved you so much after that night, and it amazes me how I could have ever existed without you, without your love. And, of course, I'll paint and become a Cézanne, you'll see, but not a Dolly. No way. I think I've already explained why. My paintings will be hanging in a museum, and you'll be looking at them, thinking, yes, I did love that woman, but she loved me a lot more. I'm so happy we have found each other. Or something along those lines. Only, why don't you ever call me? Don't you want to see me? Oh, you are so marvelous, it's astonishing. Today, when I saw your car, I was so psyched. I figured right away that you must have missed me too and come to see me. Only, how did you find my favorite spot where I usually sit and paint, huh? Anyway, I was so overjoyed that I rushed in front of the car to meet you, and you almost ran me over. That pretty girl in the passenger seat. She must be your sister or something, right? She was so beautiful and happy. Of course, she isn't lonely like other women. And you looked at me so kindly, then tapped your cute finger on your head, and so very sexily. Idiot. You got a few missing here, or what? But of course, my darling, of course I missed you. I am all by myself with no one to talk to but the fish in my tank. It's a large 30-gallon one. Those fish are cute. They are somewhat like me, I reckon. Today, before getting into my cold, lonely bed, I was watching them for a long, long time. They were dashing back and forth so quickly that they sometimes collided with one another. Like they didn't have enough room and were searching for a way out. Except, of course, they had no clue how to break out of their confined space. Their teeny-weeny hearts or itsy-bitsy brains vaguely remembered the smell of the sea, so they pounded the tank walls again and again in their eternal quest for freedom. Finally, completely exhausted, they congregated in a toy skull, hovering over the bottom, ignoring the fact that their freedom begins and ends within those four walls. Poor brainless creatures. I was so glad you called me an idiot. They thought Cézanne was an idiot until he was 51. Only after that did the whole world realize that he was a genius. I am so happy you believe in my gift. Oh, I totally forgot to tell you that I've already painted your portrait and hung it on the wall, overlooking my bed. Now you will not be able to run away from me. I will talk to you every day, perhaps giving you a kiss or two in the morning when I wake up, and at night before turning out the lights. I hope you didn't forget what I told you about the strong women. That strong, lonely women do not exist? Remember, though, that every night when you make love to your ugly, beautiful women, I will be back in my lonely, cold bed, dreaming about you, your eyes, your lips. I will be talking to you, wanting you, loving you because your portrait is right there in front of me. Unless you come over and rip yourself from my brain, from my heart, you are mine. I've been patiently waiting for you to call all this time, but alas, it never happened. Did you go away? If not, why don't you pick up the phone when I call? I am tired of waiting, so I am writing you this letter. Only, where would I mail it to? I don't have your address. Maybe you'll come for your pictures to that shop again, and I'll meet you there, okay? Dervia. The town where she lived was tiny. However, most of its residents were well-to-do. A large bay, almost as huge as the sea, washed the town on one side, while the other side of the town faced the Atlantic Ocean. In fact, those two bodies of water were so close that one could easily cover the distance between the bay and the ocean in 7 minutes. Despite its perilous location, the town carried an air of smugness, its affluent 2- and 3-story mansions scoffing at the water around them. Every resident was in love with the town. They were particularly proud of their trees, short ones with almost perfectly round crowns of lemon-yellow leaves that fringed the town on both waterfronts. They called them lemon trees, although no one had ever seen a lemon grow on them. The townsfolk did not miss an occasion to decorate their habitat, hanging garlands and banners on every branch and shrub. Nearly every porch was decorated with translucent figures of deer illuminated by tiny bulbs at dusk. For some reason, the people had singled out those particular animals, with their large, dark, intelligent eyes and constellations of white spots sprinkled on their sides, from the variety of wild game. Perhaps because they were often observed grazing in the shade of the lemon trees, although no one could imagine why or how they migrated to town from the distant woodlands. When dusk fell, the town was awash in festive lights of garlands that made the lemon trees look even brighter, as if they gave off a luminescence of their own. Most of the time at dusk, the ocean calmed down, and pleasant music streamed from the open windows and verandas, wrapping the town in a fluffy blanket of tranquility. It seemed that one simply had no right to be miserable amid the quiet beauty and bright lights. Amongst the majestic mansions gracing the Atlantic waterfronts was a tiny 2-story cottage that made visitors wonder how such a dilapidated structure could stand in the middle of such affluence. The 98-year-old woman who owned the cottage and lived there by herself did not look much better than her home. The emaciated wreck of a person, with short gray hair and faded green eyes, resembled a mummy, her skeleton covered with parched, wrinkled skin under which purple blood vessels showed like a road map. Every night, the old woman knelt by her bed, begging the Almighty to take her life, but God was deaf to her prayers and kept extending her lease on life year after year. Her sole love and passion was the ocean. She had no one else to love and cherish. Next to the ocean, she had been born almost 100 years earlier. She grew up alongside it and lived a long, hard life. She wouldn't exchange the town, which offered nothing but plenty of water, for any other place on earth. But she was tired of living. The old woman woke up at first light, as usual, a curse or blessing of old age, and dragged herself out of bed. On wobbly legs, she staggered across the room to her dresser, which was filled with assorted vintage clothes. She picked a long pair of ancient long johns and a thick woolen outfit as part of her outfit du jour, and leaning heavily on a cane, shuffled into the bathroom. Having completed her morning toilette, she hobbled down the stairs, holding the banister with both hands to maintain her balance. At the bottom of the stairs, she picked up another cane. She kept one on each floor, and proceeded into the kitchen, where she went about her usual routine of making breakfast. She boiled some water in an old, battered enamel kettle and gingerly poured herself a cup of instant coffee. Settling behind the kitchen table, which was covered with a soiled, tattered tablecloth, she brought the old-fashioned enamel cup to her face and sniffed. She'd rather have a cup of freshly brewed coffee, but at her age, the simple business of dealing with a coffee maker seemed like a major undertaking. Having finished her coffee, the old woman took half a loaf of bread from the pantry, shoved it into the pocket of her threadbare woolen jacket, and hobbled to the front door. Thick fog blanketed the town. It seemed like the houses, the streets, the lemon trees, and the world itself had dissolved in the milky substance. The bay matched the gray sky, the water seeming to have fallen asleep in the murky stillness of the morning. One had to go so close to the edge of the water to make sure it was still there. From time to time, the eerie scene was disrupted by the flapping of birds' wings. The poor things were lost in the fog, trying desperately to find dry land. The old woman crossed the road, feeling her way with her cane. It was only about 200 yards to the ocean, but old age and the fog made the trip a challenge. She finally reached her destination, an old beach chair with its formerly bright blue striped cloth faded in the sun. She lowered herself into the chair, panting from the trip. "The ocean has drowned in the fog. Well, you will find out now what it means to drown," the old woman mumbled to herself as she closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, savoring the fresh, salty air. The birds flapped overhead, and the old woman raised her eyes to the sky, peered into the chalky blankness. The air was getting chillier now that the summer was gone, and the birds began to make their way south. A gust of ocean breeze broke the fog, and, as if a curtain had been raised in a theater, the old woman saw a flock of seagulls tottering by the edge of the water. A small wave ran aground, leaving a fringe of gray foam on the sand, and the birds recoiled from it, getting closer to the old woman. "Hi, guys." The woman cracked a warped smile. "I thought I wouldn't see you today." She reached into her pocket and took out the bread. As the first ration of crumbs hit the sand, the hungry birds clustered around the food, squealing. "Eat, my dears, eat. You need nutrition while you are young. Wait till you grow old, you'll see. You won't want to look at the food, yes. You think I have always been a nameless wreck like this? Think again. I used to be young too, you know. People even thought I was a beauty, especially Bernardo. My name used to be Dervia, but that was a long time ago, before your great-great-great ancestors hatched. My eyes were the color of fresh spring grass, my hair the color of lemon tree leaves, and desires churned inside me like Atlantic waves." The old woman stopped muttering, her mind seeming to have drifted away. Some of the birds grabbed the loot and fluttered away, but those that seemed interested in the old woman's musings stayed and wandered along the edge of the water, pecking at seashells. "Here, at this very beach, my Bernardo and I used to sit on the sand, making plans for the future." The old woman continued in a low, coarse voice. "We thought we'd be together forever. We were so much in love, but the ocean broke us apart. I guess this ocean has no idea that I have been in love with it. Or perhaps it is jealous, like a man. And that's why it took the only one who had taken a place in my heart. My beautiful Bernardo was born to be happy, to make me happy. It was all my fault. I shouldn't have let him go. But how could I stop him? He wanted to go and make some money, so we could have a decent future." The old woman paused to lick her parched lips and catch her breath. The ocean breeze was blowing steadily, chasing the fog away. "How could I explain to you, free and happy creatures that look down on people, what money means? Do not believe anyone who says that happiness cannot be bought with money, although money does not always bring happiness." She coughed and shivered as the wind grew stronger. "I was working not far from here, selling ice cream from dawn to dusk. Once on my way home, I ran into an old schoolmate in the company of a young man. 'Meet my cousin, Dervia,' she chirped. 'He teaches history at our school.' I looked into the man's eyes, and the sidewalk swam under my feet. 'Dervia,' I said in a strange voice, holding out a shaky hand. 'Bernardo,' the man said, burying my sweaty hand in his huge palm. 'Dervia, why don't you go dancing at the club with us?' my friend suggested. 'Nobody is waiting for you at home, right? Stay with us tonight and have fun. I'll be joining my husband tomorrow out of town, so who knows when we'll meet again,' she babbled, grabbing my arm. I didn't say anything, the old woman continued, oblivious to the fact that the birds were long gone.
I just tagged along with a foolish smile plastered across my pretty face, confused and utterly blissful. What could I say? I was head over heels in love with my friend's cousin. And what a man he was. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a kind face and eyes the color of the night sky when the stars are not shining. At the club's entrance, my friend ran into her husband's sister and engaged her in conversation while Bernardo and I went inside. The dance floor basked in a dim light in which the shadows of dancing couples moved mysteriously to a beautiful melody. The light, the music, the whispering, and the smell of intimacy enveloped us head to toe. I was drunk on this new sensation, which crawled softly into my heart. We sat at the bar, and Bernardo ordered a martini for himself and a Bloody Mary for me. Then I found myself in the mighty grip of his arms, sliding across the dance floor to the most beautiful music ever composed. It was a heavenly feeling that I had never experienced before. I guess love at first sight is true love indeed, because what kind of love is it if it happens, say, a year into a relationship? I was very young then, only 23, and so was Bernardo. That night at the club, our hearts were filled with a wonderful feeling as we danced slowly in each other's arms. I was the happiest woman on earth. All petty grievances and all the stupid little problems that poison our lives on a daily basis vanished. It was the love that I had read about in novels, the heavenly feeling that sweeps us off our feet. I didn't realize then that love is synonymous not only with joy, but also with misery and pain. "I want to be with you for the rest of my life," Bernardo whispered, his cheeks next to mine. I looked at him, happy, confused, and frightened. A tear rolled down my cheek, and Bernardo brushed it off with the back of his hand as a gentle smile lit up his face. "I will love you always," he whispered, touching my wet cheek with his lips. "Me too," I muttered, mellowing in his strong embrace. The magic evening did not end at the club. After dancing, we came here to this beach and stayed until dawn. We sat on the sand, clinging to each other, nuzzling like little puppies. Bernardo had a similar passion for the ocean, and we watched, mesmerized, as the waves rushed toward us, yearning to sweep us from dry land and carry us into the bottomless abyss. We laughed at the waves, teased them, challenged them to come closer. The feelings that swept us that night were so strong, it was capable of defeating the mighty ocean itself. I had no idea why, but suddenly I got up and I ran into the water, with my arms stretched wide. "I have always loved you, Atlantic Ocean," I yelled. "I have no parents, no brothers or sisters, but now I have Bernardo, and you have to share me with him." Who knows? Maybe the ocean got angry at me then and eventually split Bernardo and me apart. But I was a little drunk at the time, and my tongue was running ahead of my brains. All these years I have regretted those words. One simply does not say such hurtful things to the almighty ocean. Bernardo ran after me and squeezed me in a mighty embrace. I felt his lips touch mine for the first time. He had such passionate, yearning lips. I still remember the kiss like it happened just seconds ago. His lips tasted like ocean water. It was like kissing the sea. My entire body shuddered as if pierced by a bolt of lightning. "Bernardo, please say you love me. Say your feelings for me are undying," I pleaded, glowing with happiness. "Dervia, of course you are my one and only," Bernardo said eagerly, holding me tight in his arms and kissing my long hair, which was the color of a lemon tree. "Happiness is to be beside you, Bernardo," I repeated again and again. "You are such a beautiful, good-natured girl. The men must go crazy about you," he teased. I laughed. I have no idea. Are you crazy about me? I am not a stone able to resist your charms, Bernardo said, looking into my eyes. He gently turned me around and led me back to dry land. The great Atlantic shall be my witness, for I am going to make a solemn vow to love you for the rest of my life, I cried, my mind still held captive by the Bloody Mary. Bernardo pressed his lips firmly to mine and gently lowered me onto the sand. Do you understand what I'm saying, birds? Can your tiny brains comprehend the joy of a young woman giving herself to the love of her life? Soft white sand was our bed covers. Stars were our candles. The ocean was our music, and waves lapped at my feet like cuddly puppies. Now you'll never understand this. The old woman shook her head, squinting at the sun. A soul thunderbird soared high above, as if standing still in the air, glued to the sky. Anyway, the old woman continued, as if her audience was still in place. I got home almost at dawn, exhausted and blissful. I slept through most of the day, thank God it was Sunday, and was awakened by a loud knock at my door. It was Bernardo. Come on, Sleeping Beauty, he said, laughing when I opened the door and stuck out my sleepy visage. Your Prince Charming is here to awaken you. He leaned forward and planted a kiss on my nose. Bernardo had tickets for the new movie at the Odeon, and the show was about to start in 1 hour, so I rushed upstairs to pretty myself up and slip into my favorite white dress, the only nice dress I had. It was a pretty dress, adorned with Belgian lace. I think I still have it in the attic somewhere. Boy, you look gorgeous, Bernardo gasped, as I gracefully wafted down the stairs. You are the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. I was famished, so we first stopped at the McSherry's and got some sandwiches and lemonade to go. The theater was packed, but we managed to grab a couple of seats in the back. I forget the name of the movie, but it was, of course, a love story with a happy ending. We munched on our sandwiches, drank lemonade, and held hands like a couple of lovesick high school sweethearts on a first date. It was pouring buckets when we left the theater, and we ran under a large maple tree hoping to find shelter. Suddenly, a flash of lightning lit up the sky, and a deafening crack of thunder made the ground tremble under our feet. Bad idea, Bernardo said, taking off his jacket and wrapping it around my shoulders. We have to get away from this tree, even if it means getting soaked. There, I pointed to a construction site about 200 yards up the hill. Another mansion was being added to the town, but at the time, only one had a roof over it. We ran into what looked like the only dry place in the entire world and then stopped, catching our breath. At that moment, another fork of lightning illuminated the room with an eerie white-blue flash, and in the corner we saw what seemed to be completely out of place at a construction site. A canvas cot. Perhaps it was brought in by some comfort-loving construction worker who couldn't do without an afternoon nap, but who cares? It was a blessing from heaven. Shedding our soaked garments, we landed on the soiled canvas, our lips fused in a long, fiery kiss. The storm pounded on the house's shaky wooden frame, throwing sheets of water through the glassless window, but we were oblivious to the elements. In fact, the brighter the lightning flashed and the louder the thunder cracked, the more passionate our lovemaking became during that night of ecstasy. The owners of the new mansion never knew that the first night at their house belonged to a couple of crazy lovers. I had 30 nights of love in my life. 30 nights of absolute happiness and 75 years of waiting. If you doubt me for a second, ask that gray-haired, hunchbacked old man babysitting his great-grandchildren. He was madly in love with me once, pleaded for my hand in marriage. Even after all those years, I still see the anguish of rejection in his eyes every time I meet him. My love changed me completely. I began to feel confident, strong, and happy. No chore was too burdensome. It seemed like the entire world changed around me. It was a fresh newborn world where I was as happy as a clam, shining like a new dime behind my ice cream counter. Customers would leave the store changed with the energy and goodness I lavished on them. The store owner couldn't have been happier. Every night after work, I ran as fast as I could to our meeting place here at the beach, my heart pounding and my cheeks burning with anticipation. The man who became the love of my life, my sweet Bernardo, would always wait for me here. I thought it would last for eternity. Bernardo was new in town. He came from the south, leaving his aged parents there and teaching history at the local school. He lived in a tiny rented room on the bayside. Like most humanitarians, he had the soul of a dreamer, a romantic and an adventurer, but he was sober enough to realize that his teaching career was a dead end. So we met every night, and each night I grew closer to Bernardo, to the point where I could not imagine my life without him. Once upon a moonlit night, he said to me here at this very spot, "You know, I have always dreamed of traveling, seeing other countries, other people. I am getting nowhere with my teaching, so I have been thinking of leaving this place, traveling somewhere far away, making some money." "And you'll take me with you?" I cried delightedly. Bernardo shook his head. "Not right away, dear. I'll have to get settled first, then I'll come for you." "But what if you forget about me in a distant land?" I asked, panicked. "You'll meet another woman and fall in love with her." "Dervia, darling, how could you doubt me? You must have confidence in me," Bernardo said in a slightly offended tone. "But how would I live without you?" I said in a shaky voice, tears streaming from my eyes. "I'll send for you first thing after I settle down," Bernardo said soothingly, wiping away my tears. "We can't make it on a teacher's salary. I'll make some money, and then we'll get married and travel the world." "I've never loved anyone before," I muttered through my sobs, "but I have always dreamt of it. Now that my dream has come true, my life is pointless when we are not together." "Dervia, we will always be together as long as I breathe, I swear," Bernardo whispered hotly. "You can't. You have no right to die," I said in a trembling voice. "If it happens, I will die too." "My sweet Dervia, no one is going to die. We will both live to be 100, surrounded by our great-grandchildren," Bernardo laughed, squeezing my shoulders. I giggled through my tears when he mentioned great-grandchildren. I was 23, too young to even think about that. "I hope you won't get married while I am away. Promise you'll wait for me." He peered into my eyes, looking for an answer. "How could you say that?" I yelled in mock anger. "I will wait for you for the rest of my life, rest assured." "Well, remember you have sworn an oath before the Atlantic Ocean, and the ocean does not forgive liars," Bernardo said solemnly. Finally, the dreadful day came. We spent our last night at my house. Bernardo fell asleep, but I couldn't sleep a wink. In the morning, we went to the pier. I held back my tears as best I could, but I knew it wouldn't last long. "I love you more than anyone in the world," Bernardo said with passion, placing his hands on my shoulders. "I want you to remember this well and worry about nothing. Don't cry and don't despair. I promise we won't be apart too long. Meanwhile, just take it easy, kid, okay?" I nodded, held my hands to my face, and sobbed uncontrollably. It was the worst day of my life. "Come on, honey," Bernardo said, putting his arms around me and rubbing his cheek against my temple. "You are breaking my heart. Don't you understand that I am doing this for our own good, our future?" He kissed my eyes, my nose, my lips, and I kissed him back. But panic and confusion overwhelmed me. Finally, the launch came. Bernardo picked up his suitcase, threw it into the launch, and climbed aboard. The captain blew the horn, and the battered yellow boat shuddered, belching oily smoke from the exhaust pipe. I stood on the edge of the pier alone, shielding my eyes from the sun, looking dismally at the diminishing yellow boat with its white mast and a lone figure waving at me from the aft. "I love you, Dervia. Remember this. I will come back for you soon," I heard Bernardo's last words carried to me by the salty wind. I wanted to cry, but I was out of tears. That was the last I saw of him. I couldn't force myself to go to work that day, and the thought of returning home made my heart ache. I wouldn't be able to look at the unmade bed I had shared with Bernardo the previous night, or wash his coffee cup which was still sitting on the kitchen table. So I just walked down the beach, staring blankly in front of me until I came to our spot. The town was too small for me to be able to avoid painful reminders of my beautiful but short-lived relationship. By nightfall, I forced myself to return home, but as soon as I closed the door behind me, I realized I couldn't stay there another minute. I went back to the beach, hoping the ocean could soothe my pain. It was very quiet that night. The air was almost still, and I could barely hear the surf, as if the ocean had fallen into a deep sleep. It was good, I kept telling myself. At least Bernardo's boat would make it safely to its destination. The ocean could not swallow my lover that night. I am sure of this. Although who can vouch for the unpredictable forces of nature? With Bernardo's departure, my life turned into one never-ending wait. I could hardly stay a full day at work. Desperate for a letter, I ran like mad back to my house, only to see the flag on my mailbox down, just like my hopes of ever receiving a letter. Sometimes I could see it in my head, a sheet of paper torn from a composition book, covered with my darling Bernardo's neat handwriting. I became a frequent visitor to the pier, showing up there after 6 almost every day until the fishermen and deckhands started to call me the pier girl and waved at me happily from their smelly boats. Alas, the battered yellow launch with a white mast was nowhere in sight. One day, when I was on a visit to our spot at the beach, immersed in my miserable thoughts, someone said my name behind my back. I screamed. He was back for me. Ready to faint with delight, I turned around, only to find one of my neighbors standing behind me with a puppy dog look on his face. See that withered old fool over there playing with his great-grandchildren? That was him. Only back then, he was a handsome man with sky-blue eyes and built like a racehorse. Like I said, he was just standing there with a puppy dog look on his face. "Did I scare you, Dervia?" he asked apologetically. No, he didn't scare me, but I felt like someone had just poured a bucket of ice water all over me. My face changed in a flash from total bliss to bitter disappointment. When he saw that, this giant man suddenly cried like a baby, although I looked like a baby chick next to a Rottweiler. "Dervia, please marry me," he pleaded. "And if you won't, then kill me. I can't go on like this anymore. I don't eat, I don't sleep, I can't enjoy life. Believe me, I tried to stay away from you, tried to forget you, but all in vain. You are hurting, Dervia, I can see that. You are hurting because of him. Don't wait for him any longer. Be with me. I have loved you for many years." "I can't," I said, studying the sand at my feet. "I love him." And then I turned my back on him and started walking home. So, what is love? No clue? Years ago, I asked other birds the same question. "Love is wings that lift you into the skies," they chirped. "But sooner or later, a sharp arrow finds you, and you plunge down like a stone, dead, or stay lame for the rest of your life." Then I asked the fire what love is. "Love is me. You get burnt to ashes," the fire crackled. I asked the flower what love is. "Love is beautiful, diverse, but short-lived, like us, they murmured. I asked the rain what love is. Love is the paradise where my sister's tears dwell. They are tiny but profuse, and sometimes there is no stopping them, the rain whispered. I asked the mighty ocean what love is. Love is water. People have to drink it to stay alive, but they forget they can also drown in it, the ocean roared. Well, love is all of the above, and then some. I can tell you from experience. The seagulls abandoned Dervia, who was no longer doling out food. The old woman drifted away, lulled by the murmur of the waves, but a distant voice jolted her awake. I'll be back, Dervia. Wait for me. Bernardo, you never came back to me, the old woman muttered with her toothless mouth. And I was faithful. I have been waiting for you all my life. Look at me. I'm nothing but a withered sack of bones. During the day, the ocean changed its mood and color several times. In the morning, when the sky was gray and the air motionless, the ocean resembled a vast gray valley, its surface reflecting the leaden sky, a somber yet beautiful sight. When sunset came, the sky turned crimson at the horizon, while the clouds closest to the sun were painted pure gold, projecting their mirror image upon the water. It was a stunning, mesmerizing view. The old woman finally abandoned her worn-out beach chair and shuffled home, leaning heavily on her cane. She hadn't eaten anything all day, and she felt a little dizzy. In the kitchen, she sliced some cheese and tomatoes and poured herself a glass of red wine, a perfect remedy for her insomnia for many years. Having finished her lonely meal, she went upstairs to her bedroom, pausing every second or third step to catch her breath. God, please let me go. Stop torturing me, Dervia muttered, breathing heavily. Make this my last night in this world so I can join my Bernardo. He is tired of waiting for me in heaven. She went into 2 tiny adjoining rooms, straightened the curtains that didn't need straightening, kneaded the perfectly neat covers on both beds, which hadn't been slept in for over half a century, sighed, and retired into her room. She folded her clothes, deposited them on a dilapidated chair next to her bed, and turned off the lights, mumbling something incomprehensible. She slipped under the ancient, threadbare pink comforter, her emaciated body not taking up more than 1/5 of the vast bed, slid her hand under the pillow, and pulled out a tiny radio. She turned the sound all the way up, and soon her snoring joined in with the heartbreaking arpeggio of a string concerto. Dervia woke up at the crack of dawn to the sound of a loud roar coming from the ocean. She gingerly lowered her pale, bony legs to the floor, put on the same clothes she had worn the day before, and clumsily negotiated her way downstairs. She went about her usual routine, making herself a cup of instant coffee, took the leftover bread from the pantry, and headed for the door. Outside, a violent, bone-chilling nor'easter chased garbage down the streets and battered the trees, tearing off leaves and dead branches. The sun shone fiercely from the impeccably blue sky, but its rays did not generate any warmth. Pedestrians rushed up and down the streets wearing worried faces and holding on to their hats. Dervia strolled down the beach from where the terribly apocalyptic noise was coming. The ocean was rowdy that day, a churning glass-green mass of water, raising enormous breakers decorated with whitecaps and hurling them onto the beach with a deafening noise. It looked as if the water had grown wary of its confinement and was trying to break out. Several bystanders watched as the frail old lady, wobbling like a reed in the wind, headed toward the ravaging sea, as if intending to take a swim. Someone called out to her, but the howling wind swept the words of warning away. With a strange smile on her face, her heart pounding feverishly, Dervia approached her inevitable doom. "O mighty Atlantic, you have taken my Bernardo from me!" she shrieked, her wet hair plastered to her forehead, her faded green eyes burning with fiery determination. "You think you have broken me? You think I am weak? I am not afraid of you. I have been praying for this day, and now my prayers have been heard. Today, I will finally join my Bernardo." Dervia's last words were muffled by an enormous wave that rose in front of her like a wall of dull green glass, paused as if contemplating whether this tiny speck of a human being was worth the effort, then crashed down with tremendous force, leaving no trace of the old woman. The cruel punishment called life was finally over for Dervia, who left this world without any regrets. Thank God she never found out that on the other side of the Atlantic, surrounded by his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, her beloved Bernardo, recently widowed, had lived to be her age. That memorable day, the ocean doled out punishment amply and indiscriminately. Those disrespectful to the forces of nature and careless enough to build mansions too close to the waterfront bore the full brunt of retribution. Enormous waves crushed the beautiful buildings like sand castles, claiming wealthy and poor alike as its spoils, equalizing everyone in its dark abyss. The British Marine Engineer. Lorena was far away from home. One of her friends was going out of town and had asked Lorena to babysit her mother for the duration of her trip. The 80-year-old was, despite her age, still a vigorous woman and could take care of herself, but her daughter was reluctant to leave her on her own. Lorena couldn't say no, since she lived by herself and, at the time, was not working. She quickly packed and moved to her friend's house. The woman turned out to be a quiet person, not senile in any way. All day long, she either watched TV or snoozed in her vintage recliner. Lorena's new abode was on a busy street, which constantly manifested its presence with the incessant hum of rushing traffic. The neighborhood was a canine heaven. A white colonial on one side was home to 4 furry mutts that the owner walked several times a day. Whenever the dogs spotted Lorena outside the house, they burst out barking and growling menacingly, determined to rip the stranger to shreds. The only obstacle preventing them from completing their macabre mission was a tall chain-link fence that separated the properties. On the other side lived a large red beast, prone to nocturnal oratories, announcing each and every possible passerby with demonic howling and barking. The old woman's house was flanked on both sides by tall trees, their bare branches studded with flocks of birds that, eager for spring warmth and lush summer foliage, entertained the neighborhood with dismal chirping. Beyond the trees, Lorena could make out decrepit greenhouses where neighbors used to grow flowers. The old woman's house, an old 2-story colonial that knew better days, featured a tall glass front door, the only decoration and the centerpiece of the otherwise drab facade. All day long, Lorena watched TV with the old woman, both of them sharing a passion for old westerns. The woman relaxed in her recliner, Lorena next to her in an overstuffed chair. The living room window overlooked a small front yard, and the street beyond, where a traffic light blinked incessantly, driving Lorena insane, so she had to close her eyes during the commercials. The old woman's bedroom, which adjoined the living room, featured a twin-size bed and a vintage TV. Lorena's bedroom upstairs was crammed with the old woman's possessions. The only window, just like the one in the living room, looked out onto the street with its wretched traffic light blinking straight into Lorena's eyes when she raised her head from the pillow. During the day,
Lorena ventured into the unkempt front yard to get a breath of fresh air. Shortly after she moved in,